Welcome everybody to the Art of Media Advocacy webinar. My name is Craig Reed. I'm one of the directors here for the Institute of Public Strategy, and today we're going to talk about how to use news to elevate community voices and advance change. Next slide, please. So one of the things I always love to do is talk about a story of success when we're trying to introduce some tools to the community. And one of my favorites is right here in La Mesa, which is a small city just east of San Diego. When I moved into the area, a number of us found that the west side of the community was just full of blight and abandoned buildings. A number of illegal businesses had opened up. And this is the area of town where we have 9 schools. So a lot of our youth have to walk by all of this on a daily basis. And so thanks to media advocacy and some work with our political officials, we were able to get a couple of new microgrants started. One that allows for new businesses or existing businesses to get a new facade, so a little fresh paint and everything to make it look more appealing. And then we had a blight remediation program started as well. So anybody who purchases one of the blighted lots gets an incentive to get it back up and running, so it's a contributing part to the community. So just one example that I wanted to share with you of how media advocacy can play a role in changing and transforming communities. Next slide, please. So I'm going to share with you today a way to plan your media advocacy and kind of share with you a template tool that I think you'll find is useful. Our other presenters will be showcasing some other tools you'll find helpful. One will be a strategy involving media advocacy and reaching out to reporters. And then for those of you who are newer to media advocacy, op-eds are a great way to get started in that. And we're going to have one of our presenters talk to you about how to structure your op-ed so it's successful. Next slide, please. So my colleagues today that will be presenting will be Cynthia Nickerson, who is a media specialist in the LA County area. She also has a second hat she talks about from time to time, in that she was a reporter at one point. So I always enjoy hearing what Cynthia has to say because she knows both sides of this coin, if you will. And then Meredith Gibson, the media director in San Diego County, also with us. She is a great resource for anybody who's ever had a chance to talk to her and has had a lot of success in getting some media out there in the community. Next slide, please. So just a quick overlay of what review about what IPS is. We are a public health agency specializing in upstream prevention. We're all about transforming communities. We have a high emphasis on equity and ensuring that communities are empowered to create the change that they want to see within their neighborhoods. And our CEO and president is Brenda Simmons. So, next slide, please. So let's just get the poll results real quick that we had all of you take at the very beginning. Looks like half of us are totally new to this, which is great to know. So we'll do our best to try and make certain that those of you who are new can see all these pieces and how they fit together. I see a few people have some experience, so I hope that you will get something out of this as well. These are tools that we hope that no matter whether you're brand new or if you do media advocacy or media pieces regularly, that you'll find these tools helpful. Next slide, please. So let's go into what is media advocacy. So media advocacy is strategic usage of news. It's really designed to reveal problems and also to start creating awareness and building support within the community. Think of this as like a snowball that's going down a hill, gaining momentum with each passing piece. Because the idea is you want these media pieces to be interconnected to each other and supporting one another. You also note that there's different avenues of media. So most of the time when you're thinking about getting a piece published, or you might be talking to a reporter through traditional news, or you might be scheduling an interview maybe with a radio station or your local TV station. So those are kind of what will fall under the traditional news. But let's not forget the importance of social media these days, and that's a powerful tool for not only reach out to community members, but also your policymakers who you may wish to speak through the media to at some point. And then let's not forget that there are alternatives to media that function in a way of communicating information to the rest of the community. Word of mouth is a common way. Community groups often share a lot of information among each other informally. I know one community that I was in for a while doing some research where billboards were the main way of which information was passed because they had very limited internet access. So wherever you're at, whether it's here in California or elsewhere, just keep that in the back of your mind that media might be a larger definition than what we traditionally talk about. Next slide, please. One little thing about news and making media in the news is that you want to make certain it stands out in some ways. If you think about all the news that you absorb in a given day as like cars going down a street, they all kind of blur together after a while. But if you saw this grass-covered truck going down the road, you would remember that. And so you're trying to make your media pieces that memorable thing driving down the road or on the internet that sticks in people's heads, so they will take that information and share it with others. Next slide, please. Now, media advocacy is one of the five main components of IPS's ACT model, which is our approach to community transformation. And if you haven't had a chance to learn about the ACT model, there is a YouTube video of the prior webinar that you can listen to after this one. And we'll make certain that there's a link sent out to you afterwards if you're interested in learning more. Next slide, please. So most of my conversation today with you will be about this meeting planning template. So think of this as like a framework to kind of build on so you can have effective media planning that achieves the results you're trying to work towards. On the left side are the components of each media piece, which you should consider for every media piece of which you're developing. And over the top are the different roles that media can play in your media advocacy efforts. And we'll go into those just a quick overview for each one because of limited time, but I'm happy to go over them during our question and answer session, which we will have towards the end of after all the speakers. And you are welcome to put in any of your questions regarding anything I say or the other speakers as we're going along. We'll just answer them at the end of the presentations. Next slide, please. So the components of a media piece, the main one you probably think of first is the purpose. So this one answers the question of what is the goal of this piece? What is it trying to do? And sometimes you'll also have a call to action. Sometimes it's you're asking people to contact a representative because it's strategically a good strategy at that point. Or maybe the call to action is to raise awareness within the community that there is a problem. Maybe that's the main call to action per se of the piece itself. Also, you have to think about the hook. Like, why should somebody care if they read this piece? Also, related to the hook, if you're working with a reporter, you need to ask yourself, why should the reporter care? And why should they actually take your piece and get it published or complete the interview with you or another one of your spokespeople? So always consider that hook because that's if you can't get your reporter or other people interested in this, then the purpose of your piece will kind of fall flat, unfortunately. Also think about your target audience. As we like to say, if you're targeting everybody, then you're actually targeting no one. So there's always somebody that you've probably got to have in mind when you're writing these. So think about who has the power to create change in each of these instances. It might be community members who are motivated to work on improving their neighborhood. It could be the policymakers in your community. It could be influencers, say church leaders, for example. So, and also think about where they get their news, because you want to make certain that your pieces end up in places where they'll actually get a chance to read them. And related to that is think about who does the target audience trust, who is influential with them. And those people should probably be your spokespeople, whether they are quoted in an article that you're writing on, maybe they're the author of an op-ed, or perhaps they're being interviewed on a TV station or radio station. Or maybe they're also the one that's putting out tweets on social media, for example. You definitely want to make certain that somebody that your target audience is going to trust what they have to say and be listening to them. Another good foundation piece of any piece of media is the data and research. And it should be something that's relevant to the community. So it should be local, as clear as possible, and of course accurate. I don't recommend putting a lot of data into each piece, but it's definitely some place where it definitely has its place as part of the foundation. And lastly, think about the media outlets in your area. Which ones do you have relationships with already? Which reporters have experience on this topic? Or maybe you're going to go with somebody who does YouTube videos or podcasts, and maybe they're experts on this particular topic or interested in it. And then also keeping back in mind that while you might have a good relationship with a reporter on a radio station, is that where your target audience is in this instance? Maybe you need to consider trying another radio station in order to make certain that your target audience gets to hear the messaging that you have prepared. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the different roles that media can play. And one of the foundational ones that you see very early in any type of media advocacy is raising the issue on the public agenda. It kind of answers the question, did you know? Often has a lot of data and research to kind of set that foundation I mentioned. And like, as I mentioned, it kind of is an early stage part of the media that you would produce. And it answers the question, why should I care as a resident, as a neighbor, as somebody who's a policymaker perhaps? Next slide, please. Another important piece of media is the media that frames the issue. Because one of the things that we see in our work a lot of times is that what people see on the ground and experience on the ground is different from how we might see the issue. So how are they framing it themselves, and how can we frame the issue to where it's seen as a concern for them as well? You might be able to get help on how to frame the issue by talking to local community groups that are involved in the neighborhood. You could conduct your own focus group, do some surveys, or even an assessment to better understand what's happening on the ground, so you can connect the dots for people about what they're experiencing to what the root cause is. Next slide, please. Another important piece is introducing solutions. I think one of the biggest things about this is just introducing to people that their improvements are possible. The status quo does not have to stay. And it should be a solution that matches the community's values. And one great way of doing this is by pulling examples of successful solutions that have been implemented in communities that are very similar to your existing one, for example. That tends to make people more willing to listen to these possible strategies and be willing to support them. Next slide, please. Empowering stakeholders is another important piece. This is starting to showcase the local support for the change. And often this means that you're going to have different leaders and influencers that are interviewed or quoted in media pieces, or maybe they're the ones that are actually doing some of the social media. So also it's important to get survey results out there if you have any that show how many people are supportive of this type of change. You might have some local organizations get involved. All of this is about building momentum, so that way we go from talking about change to actually creating change. Next slide, please. And then once you get to the point where you're approaching policymakers, it's important to have media pieces that give cover to them. It's helping to show that they have the support of their constituents and in order to make these changes. And it's also very important at this point to understand what media do your policymakers consume and who do they turn to for advice. These are important things to consider in your media strategies. Next slide, please. And another thing that can happen a lot of times with media is that perhaps you've had a chance to get the ordinance passed or a new law implemented, but it's always important to keep the eye on the ball. Otherwise, things can kind of change in directions you may not have anticipated. But also, you also want to celebrate the success of what happens when a change is implemented and how things improve. So it's important to highlight change as it happens and to keep people informed of how the work is continuing on, even though it may be no longer in front of city council or your policymakers at this point. It's also a great way to keep watchdogs informed, the people that are most invested in this type of change, so they can celebrate that success with you, but also be there to help you if for some reason that something's not going according to plan. Next slide, please. So just a quick recap. Media advocacy is very strategic. Each piece is meaningful and has its place. They're interconnected with each other and often have a call to action, though not all of them necessarily will, especially in the early phases. Some of the things that certainly is not is just education only. If it's just education and stops there, that is not media advocacy. A very data and research heavy piece would probably not be considered media advocacy because there's a story to tell behind those numbers, and that needs to be included as well. It's also not an isolated one-shotting piece. It's a one-shot piece, if you will. Those types of things, while might create a little bit of momentum, but we're talking about that snowball that needs time and additional pieces in order to create the momentum necessary for community change. And while it's not necessarily opportunistic either. So if there's a particular event that happens that triggers a conversation, it may having a piece then might be helpful in your overall strategy, but should not be just taking advantage of an opportunity and stopping there. Media advocacy is really about creating opportunities for change through a conversation with people through media. Next slide, please. So looking back at our planning template, which we'll be sending out a copy to all of you after this presentation is done, I have just started off the first two columns for you, just to give you an idea of what this might look like. So in this case, we have teenagers that are raising awareness that they have no grocery store to walk by on their way to school, but 6 liquor stores that they have to walk by every day. And they're raising awareness that there's an issue here. This is not supportive of them as a youth. But you see in the next column, in framing the issue, we have parents starting to frame this issue not in a way that makes sense to the community, that we want better neighborhoods with fresh fruits and vegetables and not necessarily additional liquor stores that are more than what we need in our community. So you can kind of see how we go from raising the issue with one group, in this case local teens, to starting to frame the issue into something that's a little more tangible with the local parents one. And you keep in mind that while this template only has room for one media piece in each column, that you may have several pieces that are raising the awareness. You may find that this is a very new issue in your community, so there might be a need to really dig into that deeper. You might also skip some of these if it's not necessary in your particular instance. So, and with that, I'm going to stop there and turn things over to Cynthia, who has a great strategy to share with you as well. Cynthia, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Craig. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. As Craig mentioned, my name is Cynthia Nickerson. I'm the media specialist for the IPS Los Angeles County office. And Craig laid out a beautiful example of the components of media advocacy. Now I'm going to talk to you about how to get it out there, how to actually make your story, your issue, end up somewhere in front of lots of eyeballs. Next slide, please. So a little bit about me, as Craig mentioned at the beginning, I am a former television news anchor and reporter. I have also public speaking experience. And the picture down below is me a couple of years ago when IPS LA did a survey of high school students about marijuana. And the Spectrum News One camera person showed up and I'm giving him an interview. So we're going to talk about the importance of all the media outlets that exist in any given community. Many of them you may never have heard of, but they might be the right place to get your story told. Next slide. So when we think of media, especially if you're in LA or another big city, you naturally think of the main networks, the local affiliates of ABC, CBS, and what have you. And you also think of radio, and you also think of the major newspaper. These days, most big cities have probably one, maybe two if they're lucky, but mostly one. And that is an issue. But there are some barriers to getting your story in the major media. It's not impossible. But as you know, if you look and watch and read, they really prioritize coverage of death, destruction, and corruption. And nonprofit and community organization work usually doesn't fall into any of those categories. We're here to change and improve communities. So we've got our work cut out for them to find, work cut out for us to find a great place for a landing place for our media. Newsrooms have been shrinking. 10 years ago, most TV stations had health reporters, crime reporters, et cetera. These days, they're pretty much all general. And so they don't have as many reporters. So that means they can't cover as many community things as they'd like to. In the FCC in 2011, they really talked about how this is a negative for communities. Americans' future, safety, livelihood, and their everyday life is negatively affected by not having functioning newsrooms. Next slide. So what do? If you're a nonprofit or an organization, you think you have a great story, you feel like it's worth some eyeballs on it. Community papers are excellent, excellent outlets. You might try a strategy, as I mentioned first, with the major affiliates, but do not overlook community papers, ethnic papers, local cable news, like I mentioned with the Spectrum reporter, and community radio. All of these are great outlets for local issues and local community news. They connect the community to the local government, schools, and businesses, serve as a resource that can point people in direction of how to get some help, which again, nonprofits do provide, and basically cover news and issues that no one else is talking about. So do not sleep on your community papers. Next slide. So some of them, how to find them. Well, in a city like LA or any city, there's probably many that you've never heard of. So I would start with Google, of course, and just type in, for instance, here in LA, Los Angeles community papers. I think maybe 30 or so showed up in that particular search that I did a couple days ago. And these are just a few of them. Another outlet to find them is visit neighborhood businesses such as local restaurants, fitness centers, dollar stores, those kind of places, convenience stores. Those kind of places usually have a rack where they have whatever media newspaper is covering that particular neighborhood, and they give them out for free. So it's a great way to find out things that you probably didn't know, and maybe you might find some allies for your issue. So find those neighborhood businesses, and then when you do, get on their mailing lists. Most of them do have email lists, so go ahead and find their website and subscribe. Next slide. Okay, so now that you know where to get them and you have looked on their website, read, read, read. Get very familiar with their style, their content, how they cover certain issues, how much space they may give to certain issues, or how much airtime if it's community radio. You want to contact the editors and the reporters. That may be one and the same, depending on the outlet, to introduce yourself. And just a good question to break the ice is, hi, I'd like to know how you'd like to receive news releases. And that way they're giving you information about who to contact and where and how. If you're really lucky, they might say, well, what is this about? That gives you a chance to pitch your story. And then they might, be interested right there on the spot. So always remember to contact them. If you can't get in touch with them via phone, try email. It works just as well, and keep trying. They're very busy, so they may not answer you right away, but just keep trying. And again, let's talk a little bit about framing. Excuse me one second. Craig mentioned that you need to frame your story around things that are timely, what's going on in the community. So for example, if your story is about, we deal with a lot of alcohol issues, about something related to alcohol, this is the holiday season. And for an organization like us, we might put out information about, remember not to drink and drive, remember to be responsible, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to see what's going on the calendar, what's going on in the community, and piggyback on things that are timely and important and relevant. Scan the media sources to go beyond the big stories. So even all the small papers and the major dailies, look, every single section, sports, comics, who knows? You might find some little tidbit that somebody covered that can go along with your story. And that just, when you present it in that fashion, that makes the editor, reporter, producer much more interested, because in newsrooms, speaking from experience, they want to always be with the issue of the day, the talk of the day. So you want to hook them with a new angle to an issue that's already in the news. Next slide, please. And these days, it's so much competition. You really want to offer more than a news release if you can, because media outlets want likes. They're like everybody else, but also that's part of their metrics now for employee evaluation. How much community interest was in any given story. So you want to make their job easier, and you want them to like you. So you give them information that will create likes. and there's so many social media platforms, you want to be able to ask yourself, as Craig mentioned, who cares about this story? And if you can think of at least 3 or 4 entities, that will translate into a good story that can also be on their digital edition and hopefully get some community interest through social media. Next slide. So what I'm doing in terms of offering media more than a news release, I'm putting together content packages. And the first story that's going to be a package for us is about alcohol density, which means how many alcohol outlets are in various neighborhoods. Just so you know, there's way too many in LA County. So we're working on that issue. Well, that issue is not something that your average person kind of thinks about on a daily basis, alcohol density. So what we're doing is an explainer article. So that'll be written just like something you'd read in the paper or that you hear a TV reporter verbally say, and also a news release. The difference is a news release is asking that media outlet to cover an issue. You're offering information, interviews, B-roll, whatever. So it's written for immediate release, and here's the story, and we'd love it if you show up. So giving them both is giving them a chance to maybe run some information before they interview someone or simultaneously. The package also consists of sound bites from this particular gentleman. I interviewed him via Zoom about alcohol density in Hollywood. He's well known for this, so he laid out the information beautifully, conversationally, and I have about a 10-minute interview with him that I'm going to post on our social media, but I'm also going to break it down, excuse me, into sound bites to offer a smaller paper or radio station. They need information, they need content. And then the other part of the package is an infographic. So you can see here, this is an infographic that IPS just produced about cannabis in our community. And it explains data so that you don't have to use up precious words on a paper to say, 29% of people said this and this and this, because that really doesn't get a lot of interest. But when you present it like this, it's beautiful. You can understand it, it's interesting, and people want to read more. So if you offer a news source different pieces, that would be more likely to get your story covered. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to do a huge infographic like this one, maybe just 2 statistics, but put it in a way that's visual. And then in terms of the release, 1 page or half a page is probably best. That reporter will call you for more information if they're interested, and just say, hey, I have some sound bites from one of our stakeholders. And that particular person would also be willing to be interviewed and offered to the radio station or newspaper as part of their digital platform. Next slide, please. Okay, so social media. Again, going back to lights, all reporters and media outlets want more vibrant and robust social media presence. So you want to post all of your information and remember to tag them. Tag other stakeholders as well, because the more eyeballs, the better. Find out which platforms does your media outlet use on a regular basis and go to that one. And you may even consider posting little bits and pieces of your issue over a span of time, maybe a week or so. So for instance, Monday, post a soundbite. Tuesday, post 2 statistics and lead them back to the full infographic. Wednesday, post 1 sentence on Twitter about the issue. Thursday, maybe there's a meeting or something coming up, post that. So you're stretching out your issue and you're giving yourself and the media outlet different ways to have the public engage with them. And that's what they want. Next slide. So again, about content packages, it's a good strategy for your organization to also not just get your word out, but make yourself and your organization known to your local media. Even if they don't cover what you sent in terms of a press release, they will remember that you are part of whatever issue you are, child issues, elderly, whatever your organization is. If you consistently churn out information and send it out there, they will remember you. So when something comes up in that topic, they'll remember to call you first. So it's all about relationship building and providing them content that they can use across platforms. And finally, next slide, please. This is the media planning template that we just looked at that you will get a copy of. And you can use this to keep track of what platform that you sent which piece of content. So this is a multi-purpose document, and please use it. It will help you, especially getting started. You want to be organized. So please be on the lookout for that when we send out our follow-up. All right, that is it for me. Meredith Gibson now will talk about op-eds. That's another tool in our communication toolbox. Meredith?
Thank you, Cynthia, and to everyone joining in with us today. As Cynthia mentioned, I'm Meredith Gibson. I'm the media director for IPS in the San Diego office, and here to talk to you about a really good entry point into media advocacy, which is op-eds. They stand for opposite the editorial, but some people also refer to them as opinion editorials. They are short articles generally written by an author who is not affiliated with the newspaper, unlike the newspaper's editorial board. So whereas newspapers theoretically have an obligation to report the news objectively, op-eds give space for opinions and more subjective commentary. They're very effective in bringing issues to the forefront of discussion. A couple of days ago, I just did a brief scroll through the best op-eds of 2019 in the Washington Post, for example, and uncovered just a wide range of issues that had been written about, from the symbolism of wearing a hijab for women to social and racial injustice spanning the art and literature worlds, and no topic was left untouched. What's important to note about op-eds is that they aren't just forums for readers to gripe and complain. For that, you could probably just go to, social media or whatever forum. But as Craig mentioned in his presentation, each op-ed media piece, including op-eds, has a strategy. What is it specifically that the author hopes to achieve? So it's important to note that some, but not all op-eds have that call to action, what the author wants the reader to do after they finish reading the article. Specifically, what will create the change that is called for. But other op-eds, just in its simplistic form, is just as effective at bringing attention to a problem and prompting that discussion. Next slide, please. When you're writing your op-ed, there are three main elements to keep in mind. The first one is to know who your audience is. Ask yourself some of the following questions in identifying who it is that you're trying to convince that your position is the right one. What do they know and not know? Are they fellow community members or just members of the general public? Are they students, parents, policymakers, any other type of decision maker? Or do they have a specialized background, such as in policy, public health, law enforcement, education, or some other background that is relevant to your topic? What biases or preconceived notions do they have? And once you've figured out to whom you're writing your op-ed, then you can carefully craft your message so that your message is targeted and on point. Next slide, please. So some op-eds may require knowledge and understanding of opposing views and may attempt to counter them. Here are some examples of different news outlets to read if you want to understand where the other side is coming from. These are just examples. So even though you're writing about your opinion, it still helps to understand the other viewpoint. It helps ensure some thoughtful debate on the issue and that you are pointing out the flaws of the other side of the issue and not the flaws of the people who hold those views. Some editors would argue that the purpose of writing an op-ed is not so much about trying to persuade the other side to join your way of thinking, but to tell people on your side what they should be saying when they are arguing that topic. Either way, having the ability to understand the argument from all angles allows you to quickly fill the holes when the opposition tries to poke your argument with them. Next slide, please. So going back to Cynthia's presentation about the value of local news outlets, this infographic that I have up on the screen explains it quite well. People trust local news more than national news to deliver quality, timely, and objective news. From the graph, you see 45% have a great deal or quite a deal bit of trust in local news compared to 31% for national news. According to the Knight Foundation, 6 in 10 Americans believe local news organizations are accomplishing most of the key tasks of informing their communities. Of course, as local outlets wade into controversial topics, it may leave them vulnerable to some of that same distrust associated with national news. And with that said, I saw this quote a few days ago once on a digital media outlet that read, "Unbiased news does not exist. We provide balanced news and civil discourse." With all that said, what that means to me is that there will always be space for opinions and ideas that encourage a respectful conversation in news outlets, especially at the local level where where there is a high level of trust. Next slide, please. The second basic element is to do your research. What data or personal story do you have that clearly backs up your argument? Just like you would never go into a job interview without researching what the position was about or anything about the company, you wouldn't put something out there into the universe with your name on it without being able to back it up with some solid facts. A word about data sources real quick, and this is true for any media piece and not just op-eds, is that it's easy to cite another news article as a source of data, but more likely than not, they are just a secondary source. You want to get to the primary source for your citation, whether it's published research or a government or private agency that's collected the data and published it on their website. The reason I say this is that lots of times I can read a really interesting data point in a news article, but when I go back to look for it in the primary source, it isn't worded exactly the same way, or it could be left to some interpretation. And as Craig also mentioned, just be careful about putting too much data into the text of your op-ed. If it gets too wordy, then consider an infographic that explains your data. Too much in an op-ed can easily overwhelm your reader. So use data, but use it lightly. Next slide, please. So really, writing an op-ed is a balancing act between appealing to your audience's emotions and using the reason based on common sense and critical thinking. In terms of facts and statistics, using evidence-based information makes your argument credible, and therefore your ability to persuade others to adopt your way of thinking stronger. You can balance out those facts and statistics with a good story. This is that hook that piques not only your reader's attention, but also the publisher or editor of the newspaper who is responsible for determining if it gets published in the first place. But it's those facts that lends it the credibility. Next slide, please. So a word about storytelling. The human brain is actually hardwired to respond positively to storytelling. Stories help develop that connection between the author and the reader through the transfer of emotions. They invite readers into a shared experience of characters, conflicts, and resolutions. And by the end of the story, as the transformation of the author becomes evident, the reader is enlightened with the narrative's moral of the story. In an op-ed, stories make a problem real to the reader. It puts a face on the challenges that we may all face personally or within our communities, and it makes it easier for the reader to identify to the struggles described by the author. If you do incorporate a story into your op-ed, the best way to structure it is to start with your conclusion, the lesson you learned or the manner in which you had changed. From there, you lead the reader through your journey step by step, through pivots, crossroads, forks in the road, whatever it took for you to get to your end result. And along the way, you'll share those facts and statistics. Those elements combined of storytelling and facts will help you create a compelling read and offer the best chance of getting noticed, which is what the whole purpose is, what you want, not just by the news outlet, but ultimately by the people who you're trying to reach with your message. Just a quick word here also is that if you're interested in learning more about storytelling and media advocacy, IPS is going to be hosting a webinar on this sometime in the near future. So stay tuned. Keep an eye out for that in your inbox. Next slide, please. So finally, you need to build a solid argument. How are you going to persuade others to adopt your way of thinking? Or how will you raise an issue that others may not have thought about or were not aware of? An argument will only be convincing if it's built on that sound reasoning. Next slide, please. So this is how you basically build your argument. Notice that similarly to storytelling, building a solid argument works backwards and begins with the conclusion. So as you're building your argument, you'll have to ask yourself, why do you believe the way that you believe? Is it based on your values, your upbringing, your faith, your environment, or your personal experiences? And what is it that you hope to achieve by getting people to think the same way that you do? What data do you have that supports your claim? Is it rooted in scientific method or is it anecdotal? And how will this information lead the person or people you're trying to persuade into thinking the same way that you think? And data is that link between the analysis and the conclusion. Next slide, please. So there are many different ways to persuade people, and this graphic shows what those are from subjective down to objective, from the use of emotions and personal stories to logic and facts. For most people, basing a decision on an emotion or having that gut feeling that a decision is the right one is less taxing on your brain than using logical reasoning. And this is where inserting your personal story, again, that transference of emotions into an op-ed works well in persuading the reader. I won't go through all of those, but I do want to show an example of an analogy. And I want to ask you to determine for yourself how effective it is in convincing you to support this argument. It was used by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is a big proponent of renewable energy, and he describes it this way. There are two doors. Behind door number one is a completely sealed room with a regular gasoline-fueled car. Behind door number two is an identical, completely sealed room with an electric car. Both engines are running full blast. I want you to pick a door to open and enter the room and shut the door behind you. You have to stay in the room and the room you choose for 1 hour. You cannot turn off the engine. You do not get a gas mask. I'm guessing you chose door number two with the electric car, right? Door number one is a fatal choice. Who would ever want to breathe those fumes? This is the choice the world is making right now. So whether or not that analogy is successful in convincing you or not, it's up to you. But what it does do is effectively uses analogy by creating like vivid imagery and those references to smells and basically inviting the audience into that scene. Next slide, please. So here's a typical structure of an op-ed. In the intro paragraph, you have your hook that's going to capture your audience's attention and make them stay there until the end of the article. What can you start with, though, that will compel your audience to pay attention? Maybe it's your personal story, maybe it's a profound statement, perhaps an anecdote or a surprising fact. Remember, not reading any further is the easiest decision your audience can make. And so you want to make it difficult for them to walk away from your article. The second paragraph describes that central piece of evidence that supports your position. Remember to tie it back to your main argument and how it supports your opinion. The third paragraph does the same thing. It's another piece of evidence. Maybe you want to try a different type of persuasion, for instance, emotions in this paragraph, whereas in the previous one you used an analogy or expert opinion. But whatever you choose, make sure you always tie it back to your main argument. The next paragraph is where you anticipate the opposition's reaction by offering a counter argument and then provide your rebuttal. What is your response to that, to whatever their argument may be? And why doesn't it apply to this situation or context? And in the conclusion, just a few lines to remind your reader of your main argument, brief synopsis of the evidence, and why they should care. Next slide, please. Just a couple of tips on writing tips, which goes, for any type of media piece. Number one is avoid jargon. It's that unnecessary, complicated language used to impress rather than to inform your audience. Looking at this example in that very first sentence, it's very jargony. Global reflation, synchronized global growth, upturn, normalization, structural doldrums. That's just a lot to unpack in that sentence. So an easier way, basically, an easier concept to read through is the second sentence. Many people think that the global economy led by the United States is flourishing and that we have returned to normal following a 2008 recession. Same thoughts, two different ways of presenting it. Special terms can be useful shorthand within a particular audience and maybe the clearest way to communicate with that group. However, going beyond necessary technical terms to write in jargon can cause misunderstanding or just really alienate your reader. Next slide, please. So second writing tip is to make every word count. Summarize succinctly to cut through the clutter to the core message, problem, solution, or issue. Only use the words you need, nothing more. Don't make it a struggle for your reader to get through a sentence all in one breath. If that happens, you may not be able to effectively explain the point that you're trying to get across. And it's an easy way to lose your reader. That's not what you want. Next slide, please. So if you start to find yourself getting too wordy or too jargony, just try to put on like that mental filter there and just try to cut through the clutter, cut through the jargon, and go from this first sentence, consequences of erudite vernacular, down to problems with using long words needlessly. Just, in other words, don't be someone who writes wordy sentences. Next slide, please. And just some final thoughts here. Editors are looking for timely and unique perspectives of issues. There's so many different angles that you can take. So they want to find a unique angle to something that may have already been written about. Second, before you begin writing, try to figure out which news outlet you'd like to pitch your op-ed to, and then go and check out their guidelines because some have very specific criteria, such as word count. Also, instill more optimism than pessimism. There's just a lot of negative news out there. So try to be the one that inserts some positivity. Use opinions that persuade, not rile up and stir debate. And then finally, be careful when reading the comments. There's just a lot of people out there on the internet who will comment just as, rile people up, and just be aware that not everybody's going to like what you may have to say, but that's not a bad thing if it ends up sparking a civil conversation. Next slide, please. And so again, this is the media planning template that we will be sending out to you after this webinar to help guide you. Hopefully it will help guide you in your media advocacy efforts. And just want to say thank you. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Brittany.
All right, thank you, Craig, Cynthia, and Meredith. I will leave this up just quickly if you guys want to collect their emails so you can contact them after this. And if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and add it to the Q&A right now, and I will pose those to the group. We do have a webinar evaluation that we would really appreciate if you could fill out. This will help guide us in our efforts to provide you with more useful webinars in the future. So here you can use your phone to just quickly scan the QR code, or I also provided the survey link down at the bottom. And this will also be emailed out in our follow-up email. And it will also include, our follow-up email will also include a link to the slide deck, the media planning template, and then also the YouTube link for the recording of this webinar. So now I will just go with some questions. So Craig and Meredith and Cynthia, please feel free to hop on after Craig answers if you guys have anything to add. How has the misconception of fake news affected media advocacy?
You know, on the local level, at least when I get media pieces in the local areas, local papers, I haven't seen much of an impact on that. It seems to be on social media where I see it the most. And anytime some of the when media pieces go beyond the local level, that's when you start seeing it creeping in, I've noticed. So, but the question I always have about fake news, though, is, or at least the accusation of that, the first question I have is, well, was that person part of my target audience? Because sometimes, like, especially if I'm writing a piece and I'm directing it at a, say, the city council, for example, because it's we're trying to give them cover on a particular issue, that person may not have been who I was targeting at all. So I haven't found that to be affecting at least my efforts drastically, but maybe Meredith and Cynthia have a different experience with that.
I was just going to add that I'm the same. I think that there's a general resistance to things that come outside of the community. So for example, a national issue, that people are quicker to call that fake than what's going on at the local level, because people are closer to the local community and local voices tend to be heard and respected more. So from what I've seen, it's sort of things that are kind of outside any one particular community, a national level issue, has really led to the charge of fake news more than local.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Cynthia. I will say this, that at least in my city of La Mesa, at least if I'm doing something there, we all know the reporters on a first name basis. So these are not unknown people to us. These are members of our community that we see on the, well, back before COVID, we would see walking down the street regularly.
I have on a personal level, my, I guess, sort of education in this arena came actually from watching a documentary and learning more about how social media has, I see nothing wrong with social media. It is a good thing, but it's also can be used for bad ways, and understanding sort of like how algorithms are promoting the fake news out there. Once I learned that, and I'll specifically say it, it's called The Social Network, or no, excuse me, The Social Dilemma. I did a little bit more digging into like algorithms and how that's working, and just that proliferation of fake news going on out there, and how a lot of people are not aware that what they're reading is not generated by someone, a human being, but by a bot or something like that. So I would just say, read up on that and technology.
Awesome, thank you. And Cynthia, just a quick question for you, for those of us who are not media advocates or have not worked in the field yet. When you were talking about your content packages and your voice clips and stuff, you mentioned B-roll. Can you let us know what B-roll is?
I did say that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's jargony, so I apologize. B-roll is video that is explains what you're talking about. So in my particular example, I'm talking about alcohol density or the proliferation of alcohol outlets in smaller areas. So if I were needing video to post somewhere or to send to a TV station, I would go out and get shots of liquor stores and convenience stores, etc., and show them from different angles how so many are packed into areas that they kind of crowd out, like Craig was mentioning earlier, grocery stores and other types of businesses. So it comes from A-roll, B-roll. A-roll, just so you know, is audio. B-roll is video. I didn't make these up, but I learned that. And so that is jargony. But if you're explaining a news story to somebody and you say B-roll, they think you're, wow, okay, you really know what you're talking about. So it is, yeah, video.
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate it. Okay, Meredith, do you have any tips for incorporating the youth voice in media advocacy?
So first of all, it doesn't take much because the news media, they love to hear youth voices. My experience has been when we have had events, press or press conferences or news conferences, we can have adults and we can have teenagers there, and they want to hear from youth. They are always the ones that the reporters or the cameramen kind of gravitate towards. So I do a lot of spokespersons training with our youth groups here in San Diego County, and I work really hard in shoring up their confidence, so that, because I can tell you, if they are going to be at an event where there's going to be press, they have something to say and the press wants to hear it. So a lot of, there's could be like spokespersons training, but, again, I think they're just such an undervalued commodity in media. I think that they have so much to say. They have such a different perspective that adults are not taking into consideration, that it's almost like the media just gravitates towards youth.
And real quickly, on that note, Meredith, if anyone wants to do a news release about an issue coming up that involves the youth in whatever your issue is, you want to start or frame your news article or news release, high school students think X about this. We got a lot of interest when we did the marijuana survey because we were surveying high school students, among others. And so by starting with that, high school students think this about cannabis, or high school students will perform, it really does get a lot of interest. So you want to make sure you put that high up in your press release or your pitch to news media.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a lot of questions coming in. I just want to make sure that everybody knows the questions that we don't get to today, we definitely do want to answer. So we will be posting those on our Facebook page by Monday. So please feel free to go there. We do have time for hopefully 1 or 2 more questions. So let's go with this one. How would you scale the media advocacy to like the national or federal organization, since we are very much a community-based organization? How would you suggest scaling it higher to that national level? Craig?
Well, I can say that I do work a bit on the state level as well with some of my efforts, and I was just kind of thinking about that. One of the things that we end up doing is coordinating with other organizations. So we're not just doing it in isolation down here in San Diego, but we have other organizations that are kind of what we call it clustering. So it's when different organizations are producing media on the same topic around the same time frame usually, or at least, or maybe one right after the other. This has been a helpful strategy on the state level when we're trying to influence policymakers on a particular issue of concern and educate them on what the ramifications could be if something is passed or not passed. So that's one of the things I would think about, is who can you collaborate with in order to make this a state or national awareness campaign.
If I can also add in there that, remember, media advocacy is not just about your traditional media, TV, radio, newspapers, and digital news outlets, but also it's so much more. There's trade publications as well. There are there's just so many different like publications that are specific to an industry, specific to a region, that targets a specific type of audience, and they may be smaller in scale, but it's easier to scale up. So always, don't forget about those resources either.
And bloggers too.
Yeah.
Bloggers are getting a lot of influence now. You just do a quick Google search, bloggers about, and fill in whatever your subject is and see what comes up.
Wonderful, thank you. So we are at time now, and I do want to be respectful of our panelists and also our attendees' time. So we're going to go ahead and close the webinar. I just want to really thank Craig, Meredith, and Cynthia for being here to share your knowledge with media advocacy with us, and to all of our participants who joined in.